Will Anderson didn't happen. He did not have a great game, but guess what? He's a great player, so he made a great play when needed. Yo, this is Tribe with Yo Tribe Sports Bag, and I'm back at it again today with you, and I'm getting into some sports. This is right after the Alabama Crimson Tide took on the Texas Longhorns in Austin, Texas, and got away with a 20-19 victory, a much closer game than expected. That's why I know why you're here, and you know why you're here. You saw the thumbnail, and that thumbnail said, Alabama wears down unranked Texas 20-19. That game should not have been that close, according to Vegas, according to Alabama fans, according to a lot of college football fans outside of Austin. The number one team in the country got a big scare in Austin. The 20-point favorites going into the game fought tooth and nail just to limp out of there with a 20-19 victory against the Texas Longhorns, who brought their A game against the Alabama Crimson Tide, which a lot of teams do because they're Alabama. They are the evil empire of college football. They are the face of college football. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, it does not matter. We know what Alabama is all about when it comes to the college football world. Quinn Ewers, 9 of 12, 134 yards. He looked very good against Alabama. He didn't have a strong arm, but he has a very nice grasp of the team and the playbook. He was able to drop the ball where it needed to be dropped, and there were plays made. However, he was injured. He was driven into the ground, and it looks like he suffered some kind of an arm injury, maybe a collarbone, because he was driven into the turf. He had to leave the game. And the guy that he had fought tooth and nail, it was Steve Sarkisian, had to make an 11th hour decision, choosing the leader for the quarterback position for the Texas Longhorn. Hudson Card came in. He had a commendable time as well. He made plays with his legs. He threw a few passes. He looked good out there. He was also sacked quite a bit. But he held his head, and he was able to get Texas down the field in position to score and made it very tenuous for the Alabama Crimson Tide. See, Bama did not have any answers in the early going when it came down to Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver for the Texas Longhorns. He is a speedster at under 170 pounds at 6'1". This guy's light, but he's lightning fast just as well. And they did not have answers for him. They could not cover him one-on-one. And the difference is Alabama, because of all the recruiting they have done in the past, the 5-star players backing up the 5-star players and the 4-star players wishing they were 5-star players, they were able to take care of individuals one-on-one because they just had more talent than you. This time around, that wasn't working. Alabama could not handle Xavier with that type of efficiency. He was burning and blowing past their defensive backs to a point where they eventually had to scheme him out. Not work man-to-man, but scheme him out. Say, this is the guy. Okay, we got a guy here. We got a safety deep here. We're not going to let him burn us. And he was still getting his burn. They eventually slowed him down, but he did his damage and kept Texas in the game before they eventually slowed him down. So let's not forget about how that went. Alabama, are they falling apart? I don't think so. Between the transfers they've been getting and between the usual recruiting that Nick Saban gets, you know, Nick Saban gets the best of the best because they come to him. He's the Pied Piper. They're coming to him. Some things may have changed because of NIL. Some things may have changed because Kirby Smart can do a lot of the same things because he knows about Saban, how he gets things done. Jimbo Fisher had done the same thing. If you watched some of my videos in the past, you saw what Jimbo Fisher is doing in the recruiting world just as well. And he's comparable to what Nick Saban is doing. So Nick has the players now, but I think the talent level is dropping between players transferring and players defecting, going to the NFL. You know, you just can't keep it up for as long as they actually did because they've been successful doing it for so long. But anyway, getting back to the game at hand, Alabama was getting manhandled on the defensive line. Their offense was getting manhandled by Texas's defensive line, and we hadn't seen that in a long time, especially from a team outside of the SEC. See, it's not uncommon for someone like Georgia to do it, or a resurging Florida to do it. Even Kentucky. We see teams like this, and Alabama may have a time or two until the adjustments are made at halftime or throughout the course of the game, and Alabama will get back to business and start beating up on those teams. But a team outside of the SEC, the SEC is supposedly the penthouse. When you leave the penthouse, you give your keys to the valet parker downstairs. You don't expect him to have a bigger and better car than you. And this is pretty much what almost happened in Texas this time around, as the Longhorns were going down the field uninterrupted with duo quarterbacks who aren't supposedly up to par with the types of players that Alabama typically gets. And then defensively, how Texas was able to play. Individually, they got it together. I don't know was it because they got up for a huge game against Alabama like most teams do, or because they're actually that good and this is the beginning of something big for Steve Sarkisian in Texas, which is a real possibility considering the talent that's in the state of Texas from their high school ranks. And as told on the broadcast, over 95% of the players on the roster of Texas come from Texas high schools. The only one I believe is just as comparable is the state of Florida. But the state of Florida has multiple flagship schools between Miami, Florida, state of Florida. Texas is the flagship team in the state of Texas. I know Texas A&M has been playing well over the past couple of years, maybe even several years, but UT is the flagship program there. They're going to keep these top players inside the state of Texas. I can see Sarkisian doing the right thing. Moving on from there, just for a little while, let's talk about what didn't happen. Will Anderson didn't happen. He did not have a great game, but guess what? He's a great player, so he made a great play when needed. But in between time, in the interim, he made a bunch of bad plays as well. He made penalties. He did a lot of things that aren't Will Anderson like, but are they really? Because when you're a front runner and you're beating teams all the time, you don't have to worry about getting frustrated and doing things that are out of character. Well, when the going got tough, he started doing things which are perceived out of character. Hitting players after the whistle, that kind of thing. Boneheaded plays that really put Alabama in a tight fix in a game that's so tough, in a game that's so close. And it should have been that close according to Vegas, but Vegas doesn't play these games. These players play these games. They brought their heart to the table, and Texas was ready for it. Their fans were ready for it. Will Anderson acted like he wasn't ready for it. The player who's supposed to be the best college football player in the entire college ranks, the so-called number one pick in the NFL draft, regardless of position, Will Anderson, making the mistakes, but still, let's give credit where credit's due. He blew up when he needed to. He really put Alabama back in position to take the lead, and that's the lead they ended up winning by because they got the field goal, ended the game, but that's how it went. But Will Anderson, I'll keep my eye on you. Things are going down, and I will keep my eye on you. You definitely know. Another thing that's not Nick Saban-esque, 15 penalties. 15 penalties from a Nick Saban team. That's the most in the time he's been in Alabama. 15 penalties for a whole football field of yardage. 100 yards in penalties. I know that might have kept the game close, and I know some people, because fans are fans, they'll talk about how two quarterbacks intermingling with Texas is the reason why that was close. If Ewers stayed in, they would have won. If Ewers would have done this, they would have won. That's just how it goes. On the other side, if Alabama didn't drop nearly every pass that was thrown, they might have won by even more. Bryce Young, as well as he played with his legs and with his arms, at one point in the fourth quarter, he had 91 yards for the game. 91 yards, that's it. The Heisman Trophy winner, and now after this performance, I think he's right in the lead right now. 91 yards, but then, of course, big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games. And that was Bryce Young. That was Will Anderson when you needed him most. And that's what brought the Crimson Tide to the victory in Austin, Texas, after a huge scare. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to, did you win? Yeah, a little bit of how you won. And to that end, does Alabama remain the number one team in the country? Well, let's look at last week. Ohio State had problems against Notre Dame, but they still won. Georgia played so well against Oregon, who was highly ranked. They blew them out. So Georgia jumps over Ohio State, even though Ohio State won against Notre Dame. So it's only fair after a win, a tight win against a 20-point underdog and an unranked team, Alabama should drop. Georgia should be number one right now. It's not going to hurt too much of anything because the top 4 teams as it stands right now are going to be the teams that make a difference as the season goes on or at the end of the season. If things play out the way they probably should play out, including for Alabama, the SEC championship game, which they may beat Georgia anyway, it doesn't even matter. So looking back at this game again, did Texas overachieve? I think, as I mentioned, teams like this, they get up for big games against Alabama. Teams like Alabama, they get up for them. I mean, I think you still get up more for Alabama right now than you get up for Georgia, who won the national championship last year, beating Alabama. But that's just how it goes in the college football world. And the way they vote on these things, you can say whatever. And another thing, let's not forget this little part right here of how I saw a lot of these little cracks at Alabama. Like when Alabama was doing a lot of holding because they couldn't deal with Texas's speed. And the announcers mentioned it over and over. You know, Joe Klatt and Gus Johnson mentioned it several times. And they was like, you see, now you know what SEC fans and the SEC players outside of Alabama have been saying all along. Alabama gets away with a lot of crap. And now they were in Texas. Is that the reason for the 15 penalties for 100 yards? Some of those penalties and yardage might have been some of the things they might have gotten away with if they were playing in the SEC. So there may be a point to be made there, but Alabama is still a great team. I just don't believe, based on this performance and based on Ohio State losing their ranking because of a close game, I think Alabama needs to go down 1-2. I'm not saying Ohio State needs to leapfrog them, but I do believe that Alabama needs to give up the number 1 spot. Georgia needs to go to their rightful place as defending champions and proving that they hadn't dropped off as much as everyone thought, so that we can have a true ranking system, even though it doesn't matter until really October. We can go along with that. So Bryce Young, of course, we already know the Heisman Trophy leader right now, if you needed to have one. He had several drop passes and he did not get flustered. He still looked like Joe Cool behind the center. He made the plays. He threw the ball with precision. He ran the ball when he needed to run. And that other play in which they blitz, he just dodged the blitz. Man, that alone, just give him a Heisman right now. If anyone could do anything like that on a solid scale, even though Texas wasn't ranked, but the game they played was championship caliber, give him the Heisman right now. So with that said, I'm Trav, but yo, Trav Sports Back. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments. I'm going to do some live shows. I think it's a good idea now that the college football season is back and we can do some posts and pregame talking and shows, etc. You know, just to get into the groove of the college football season. The NFL is starting up tomorrow, and sports is at my behest. Until next time.